Our guest today became president of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation on September 1st, 1999. Previously, he had been president of the New School for Social Research in New York City for 17 years. With assets of over $6 billion, the MacArthur Foundation is one of the nation's largest foundations. It makes grants and program-related investments in the United States and abroad, totaling more than $225 million annually. At Yale University, our guest today earned a baccalaureate degree in 1965, a master's in philosophy in 1977, and a doctorate in American history in 1978. Our guest today's wife is a distinguished City Club member. And Cynthia, where are you? Cynthia, there, stand up so they can see it. Cynthia Greenleaf Fanton is the Director of Partnerships for the Chicago Public Schools and an outstanding City Club member. Thank you for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the City Club of Chicago, the president of the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, Jonathan Fanton. Jonathan?
Thank you, Jay, for that generous introduction. It is nice to be back, and reminds me of how many people I've come to know and come to have as friends in the city as we mingled before, and this is a great crowd. Thank you all very much for coming. I do a lot of public speaking, and after you do that a while, you get used to it, but it's always good to have an affirming break a leg, or I know you're going to do a great job beforehand. So I was a little taken aback when Paul Green said, you know, the way to start is to get up there and announce that the MacArthur Foundation is going broke. And there'll be no more grants. We gave most to Andy Mooney yesterday. And see how many people stay. Well, I'm happy to report, especially for the staff present, that MacArthur is not going broke. Well, I've had performance of any major foundation over the past 3 to 5 years. Our endowment has grown from something like 3.8 a few years ago to 6.5. Today, and next year we'll be giving out $250 million in grants. So we're doing just fine. So you can stay. I'm happy to be here today to talk about the future of cities and their neighborhoods. Yesterday, Mayor Daley joined me and Andy Mooney, Director of Chicago LISC, in announcing a $26 million grant to the New Communities Program, which is the most ambitious neighborhood revitalization initiative anywhere in America. This is part of a $150 million 10-year investment that MacArthur is making in Chicago neighborhoods which are opening opportunity for their residents and fueling economic growth in the broader Chicago region. So I want to talk to you today for a few minutes about good things happening in cities all across the country, but also how Chicago is leading the way in a new era of urban renewal. And then we'll have lots of time for questions about Chicago, about U.S. domestic policy, about MacArthur's work worldwide. But first, just a few words about MacArthur. We're best known for the MacArthur Fellowships, the so-called Genius Awards, and also for our support of public radio and television. But that's only about 5% of what we do. Next year, as I said, we'll make grants of $250 million in 65 countries where we work all around the world. We have offices in Mexico, Nigeria, India, Russia, and very soon a representative in China. But more than any other foundations of our size and profile, MacArthur is deeply rooted in its home city. We spent nearly $40 million in Chicago last year, supporting 180 arts and cultural institutions, from world-class treasures in the museum campus to neighborhood groups like Red Moon Theater, the Experimental Sound Studio, the Neighborhood Writing Alliance, the Albany Park Theater Project, 1-2 Dance Theater, and many more across the city. We've taken a great interest in helping the transformation of Chicago's troubled public housing system into new mixed-income communities of opportunity, and that was the topic of my last talk here. And all of our national programs, from juvenile justice to affordable housing preservation, find a deep expression here in Chicago. And we think we're a better foundation in everything we do around the world because of our deep and long-term engagement with the people, the communities, and the institutions of this great city. We see how complex problems are. We come to appreciate the wisdom of local knowledge, and we understand that grand theories take real people willing to challenge and adapt them if they are to work in practice. And I think we're more humble about what a foundation can accomplish directly, more respectful of our grantees who are on the front lines doing the work, taking the risks. And I think we've also come to value enduring partnerships with our grantees because of our experience here in Chicago. And no partnership has been more rewarding than our work with LISC Chicago under Andy Mooney's superb leadership. The New Communities program is a bold initiative to show that America's inner cities have untapped human, organizational, and physical assets which, when unleashed, can contribute to the economic vitality and social cohesion of our city, and that's so essential for us to be successful in today's global economy. So there's a direct connection between the health of inner city neighborhoods, the city as a whole, and the broader region. NCP is a strong commitment to the promise of America to provide opportunity for all. And while MacArthur's investments are deepest in Chicago, our ambition is for Chicago to show the way for cities everywhere which are undergoing profound change. If you look around the world, it's urbanizing at a record rate. 19 million people live in and around Lagos, Nigeria, where we work, 13 million in Mumbai, 11 million in Sao Paulo, and the numbers are swelling. And from Beijing to Shanghai, from Bangalore to Hyderabad, vast new economic corridors are emerging between and among cities. And here in the US, we know that cities are now vital hubs of complex regions where suburbs are taking on urban characteristics. Growth and change within and around cities poses a challenge to the role cities have played over time in stimulating innovation, nurturing the arts, and forging a common culture. And I'm reminded of a question posed by Lewis Mumford, who, by the way, was teaching at the New School, in his major work, The City in History. He asked, and I quote, "Will the city disappear, or will the whole planet turn into a vast urban hive, which would be another mode of disappearance? Can the needs and desires that have impelled people to live in cities recover at still high levels, all that Jerusalem, Athens, and Florence once seemed to promise? Is there still a living choice between necropolis and utopia? The possibility of building a new kind of city that will, freed of inner contradictions, positively enrich and further human development?" Profound question. Well, MacArthur's answer to that question is a resounding yes. We have choices about the future of our cities, and we see the possibility of making cities once again the source of what is best and most hopeful in our shared humanity. For decades, talk about cities has been dominated by the perception of urban decay, the flight of people and jobs to the suburbs, and skepticism about the possibility of progress. But the current reality, evident here in our own hometown, paints a far more interesting and hopeful picture of urban opportunity. In the past decade, the population of the nation's 50 largest cities has grown by nearly 10%. This was accompanied by a rise in city incomes that was almost double the national average, and by an increase in housing units, home ownership, in mortgage lending. And in that same period, concentrated poverty declined 24%, and urban crime saw a marked decrease. These trends give cities their best chance in decades to compete for business, workers, and residents. The advantages of well-established educational and health institutions and distinctive downtowns, neighborhoods, cultural amenities are looking better and better. And so that, I want to underscore the point, we are at a moment in history. Not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, but right now. And if we are ever to have a chance to bring cities back, it's now. And that's why MacArthur is devoting the resources it is to LISC and to urban renewal across the country. Cities are finding an important new niche as the economy increasingly rewards knowledge, innovation, and entrepreneurship together with a cosmopolitan perspective. But cities, including Chicago, still face a troubling legacy of persistent poverty and racial separation. We may be on the move up, but there's lots more to do. And that's why so many of us here have dedicated ourselves and our resources to addressing such challenges as alleviating poverty, reducing racial and ethnic disparities, revitalizing low-income neighborhoods, and promoting balanced growth. We are, as I said, at a moment in history when the hopeful trends I cited embolden us to make a determined effort to confront these challenges. And that's what the New Communities program is all about. It starts with a profoundly simple assumption. Sustainable neighborhood improvement requires long-term investment in all the issues: schools, housing, health, economic development, safety, community cohesion, and much more. That all this must happen at the same time in a virtuous, reinforcing circle. And it affirms the belief that the capacity to make a difference resides in community organizations and the people who live and work in our neighborhoods. And that is why lead community groups in each of the 16 neighborhoods where LISC and MacArthur are working together have crafted a concrete plan of action calling for both public and private investment. MacArthur's first grant of $21 million some years ago enabled LISC and its community partners to attract $225 million of additional investment in these neighborhoods. Not a bad ratio. And so yesterday, we were pleased to follow on with a $26 million grant to the New Communities program, one of the largest in MacArthur's 30-year history. This renewed commitment acknowledges the vision, the energy, the creativity, and the hard work of neighborhood leaders who are producing results across 16 Chicago communities. Many of them are here today, and I'd like to pause for a moment to ask the LISC staff, those working in lead agencies, and the MacArthur staff, especially Julia Stash and Susan Lloyd, Herman Brewer and Sproul White, and our new colleague Craig Howard, to stand up so we can acknowledge the great work you're doing. So everything I'm about to say, they're doing it, and they get the credit. And it is just such a great privilege to have this team of LISC, MacArthur, and the great neighborhood organizations. We're on the move. The plans that you all have crafted through a cumulative process that involved 4,000 Chicagoans is gaining traction. The mayor and his commissioners have embraced the plans and committed staff and money to implement them. And it was very significant. The mayor spent an hour and a half with us yesterday as we made this announcement. And LISC predicts that our new grant will trigger a further $500 million of new public and private investment in these neighborhoods. But, you know, being a foundation, before we renewed our commitment, that seemed easy to do, we had to take a look. Was our money being well used? So we commissioned an independent team of experts to take a hard look at NCP, to ask probing questions, assemble tangible evidence of progress, and to tell us where it was falling short of its aspirations. Well, I'm happy to say the report concluded that, while not perfect and still evolving, NCP has worked remarkably well. And I agree with that conclusion. I've seen the progress firsthand with my own eyes as Andy Mooney and I travel around to 3 or 4 neighborhoods each quarter. Recently, I spent the morning with Jack Fuller, one of our trustees, in the near West Side, Pilsen, and Logan Square. A lot's happened since my first visit to those neighborhoods 4 years ago. I saw buildings that were on the verge of being abandoned, now repaired, and housing low and moderate income families. I saw an old Covenant, now closed, in the process of being converted to a student dormitory. I visited the North Lawndale Employment Network, which helps ex-offenders get their lives back on track with job training and counseling. The results from that center are very impressive. People in this program are 3 times more likely to rebuild their lives and avoid re-incarceration than ex-offenders on a citywide average. And that's a real return on investment. I went to several of the 13 Centers for Working Families. It's a signature program of NCP, which offers job training and financial literacy counseling to thousands of people across the city. I went into neighborhood schools and watched parents mentoring students, and that was a profoundly satisfying experience. And so let me give you just 2 examples from a couple other NCP neighborhoods that may illustrate how it all works, showing how local organizations can leverage modest investments into better things. I'll give you just 2. When the tenants of the Lorrington Apartments found out that their landlord was going to end his Section 8 contract and redevelop their 54 units as condominiums, read gentrification, the Logan Square Neighborhood Association responded. The association organized the tenants, identified a nonprofit developer to purchase the building and maintain it as affordable rental housing, and that had been a top priority of the Logan Square Quality of Life Plan. LISC put in, if I'm remembering this right, $32,000 in grants from MacArthur funds and arranged for nearly $500,000 of loans, and that triggered a $10.5 million deal, and as a result, 54 families are now living securely in affordable housing in the homes that they've come to love and know. Community can still gentrify, can't resist that, but keeping a mix of incomes and communities is one high goal for NCP. One more example. The Quad City Development Corporation is working to establish a vibrant commercial district on the city's mid-south side. A market study funded by MacArthur and completed by the research firm Metro Edge found that local residents spent $450 million a year outside of their neighborhood, sometimes in the suburbs, because there were no price-competitive stores in their own neighborhood. Think of that, almost $500 million of purchasing power going out of a neighborhood. Armed with that data, LISC and Quad Community reached out to shopping center developers, grocers, and other merchants, and they were successful in attracting 2 new out-of-town developers who will build the shops and residences at 47, a 170-unit mixed-use development with 60,000 square feet of retail space at 47th and Cottage Grove, and that is going to really stimulate development all along that corridor. And I think it's important here to make a point that while we're working in 16 neighborhoods, these commercial corridors know no boundaries of neighborhoods, and so the spillover effect to many other neighborhoods, and LISC, of course, independently works in many of those neighborhoods, as do we. So we focus on 16, but this is really a strategy for the whole of the inner city. Now, while these concrete early successes give us hope, we know the path to sustainable, healthy communities is long and winding. You may be saying to yourself, those examples are great, but what do they add up to? We're going to have a lot of one-off success stories, but does that really do the job? Well, we agree that the success of NCP needs to be measured against specific goals, like more good jobs in the neighborhoods, a variety of shops and stores where people live, stable, affordable rental housing and rising rates of home ownership, lower crime, venues for the arts and other leisure activities, test scores and high school graduation rates that are rising, and more. And so MacArthur has funded the Metropolitan Chicago Information Center to track indicators of progress in these neighborhoods. It's too early, probably 5 years in, to have clear results or to claim cause and effect. But there are some signs of positive progress on these very hard indicators. Against the composite set of indicators, the Community Vitality Index, half of the neighborhoods have improved, while the city as a whole has declined. Home prices have increased in all neighborhoods, with most clustering in the 15% to 18% range. School achievement is up in about a third of the communities, and the high school graduation rates are up in 2/3 of the neighborhoods, and indeed in 4 of those communities, they're up 2 or 3 times the citywide average. Especially worth noting is the fact that the rate of business growth was up between 2.5% and 3% in all NCP neighborhoods, against a citywide decrease of about 0.5% per year. Now, those are not fields of dreams, vague hopes. Those are real hard statistics of improvement. We don't claim direct cause and effect, but we're certainly not hurting, and the results compared to citywide averages are really encouraging. Numbers, of course, don't tell the whole story. Every neighborhood is different. Some will succeed, some may not. And if NCP is to be a useful model for cities around the country, which is our hope, then we need to document what works and why. And so MacArthur and Lisk have engaged a respected national research organization, MDRC, to take a deep analytical look at NCP. And among the questions we're asking, what improvements have occurred in neighborhoods as a result of NCP? There we're trying to get at cause and effect. What neighborhood changes are most important to engaging long-term commitment of residents and institutional stakeholders? What strategies work best in particular kinds of communities? These are, after all, different neighborhoods with quite different populations and characteristics. What factors set neighborhoods on an upward or downward trajectory? And how does progress in NCP neighborhoods spread to adjacent neighborhoods and create a rising tide that lifts all? Now, I imagine some of the audience may now be saying, why is MacArthur putting so much emphasis on documentation and evaluation? That's expensive. There are a lot of needs out there. Isn't that just sort of icing on the cake? But I think the answer to that goes to how a foundation works. We take on vast problems, just from MacArthur's stable: improving human rights in Russia, reducing maternal mortality in India, protecting biodiversity in the eastern Himalayas, and of course, improving America's cities. We obviously don't have enough money to solve any of these problems directly, but we can provide funds for demonstration projects. And if those demonstration projects work and can be independently verified and defined, then we believe public and private investment will follow and take these good solutions to scale. That's what foundations do. The New Communities program is clearly an expression of our devotion to our hometown, our love of the people of the city, but it is also part of our national effort as a foundation to contribute to urban revitalization. And therefore, it's important that we accurately define and describe what we're doing. And of course, the good things we do can be diminished, even undone, if the model is misunderstood and misapplied elsewhere. So we have some self-interest, all of us, in getting at what it is we're doing so that other cities can be faithful in adapting it to their circumstances. So we've stepped up our evaluation of NCP because of the extraordinary and, dare I say, frightening interest in the Chicago model. And that's a nice phrase, isn't it? It's now known as the Chicago model. Once again, Chicago contributing something great to the nation. Our country is eager, perhaps desperate, for an approach to community development that works. And we in Chicago, the NCP, what LISC is doing is, as I say in the technology business, the new thing. Hundreds of visitors have come to Chicago to learn about NCP. National funders are seeking out NCP as a framework for investment, and perhaps even prematurely, the NCP model, the Chicago model of comprehensive community development, is spreading to 10 other cities through the parent organization of LISC Chicago, which works in 30 cities across the country. And so among the cities that this model will be tried out in very soon, our neighbors to the north in Milwaukee, the Bay Area, Indianapolis, and even our nation's capital. This interest has two important implications. We need to know how well we're doing, and we need to be able to tell others what the essential ingredients of the Chicago model are, and we need to invest sufficient energy, imagination, and resources in making the approach work. Chicago is in the national spotlight on community development, and this is a tremendous opportunity to show that we are the can-do city, the city that works not just downtown, but in all of its neighborhoods. So here comes a mild pitch. On your tables, I think it's blue, they're green, whatever. There are little brochures. This is called a community investment portfolio. It's made up of 14 carefully crafted projects, each with the potential to catalyze substantial improvement in Chicago neighborhoods. Some of the projects call for substantial residential and commercial development, but others are more modest in dollars, but heavy on civic experience. Some examples: in Auburn Gresham, a vacant building will be turned into a community center that uses green technology for efficiency and affordability. A partnership in East Garfield Park aims to populate retail streets with places to stop and shop, eat and greet. The Madison Street Roadmap will build a commercial corridor that is likely to spill over into a number of communities. And finally, in Little Village, there's a campaign to demolish an empty and dilapidated school building that blights 2 city blocks and build a city park and recreation center where young people can exercise and take part in constructive activities. These and other projects represent concrete investment opportunities. And if we can go forth from this meeting fired with enthusiasm to invest and recruit others, then we will contribute to the momentum underway for the new communities program. It is within our shared capacity to realize what Munford calls the potentiality of cities to develop our deepest humanity. These tangible signs of commitment and caring will come together to ensure the full realization of the vision of the New Communities program, which is to create communities that offer both social and economic security and opportunity to all their residents. And that is a real return on investment. Some of us in this room came of age during the Great Society, an era of optimism that poverty could be diminished and inner cities made healthy again. Think back to the 1960s. In the intervening 40 years, progress has been slower than we'd imagined. As federal programs came and went, political will waxed and waned, and buoyant optimism turned to passive acceptance of conditions not worthy of the richest society in all of human history. But a lot has been learned since Lyndon Johnson declared a war on poverty, and that learning is captured in the New Communities program, and that's why I think it's struck such a responsive chord, not just here but around the country. We now know that energy must come from the neighborhoods, not from Washington, that strong community organizations are the critical drivers, that public programs must stimulate private investment, that substantial and stable resources are necessary, that single-issue campaigns don't work. We must address health, jobs, housing, education, crime reduction, economic development, and more all at once. And most of all, we've learned that neighborhoods once described as blighted are sources of untapped physical and human potential ready to respond to trusted opportunity. I had high hopes as a student at Yale in the 1960s and then as a community leader in New York in the 1980s. But now I have informed optimism that Chicago in the 21st century can do it. The New Communities program is going to show America that central cities are back, engines that will drive the global competitiveness of whole regions. Together we can realize our nation's highest aspirations of a just and humane society where everyone has an opportunity for a secure and decent life. I say together because MacArthur is only one actor. We hope our grant to LISC will inspire others to invest, and both of us, LISC and MacArthur, welcome partners. Chicago, I believe, can lead the way, can lead America to Mumford's dream, building a renewed city that is, in his words, a true commonwealth of communities aiming bravely at the good life. Come and join us, and thank you for listening.
Oh, take me you want. Before you go, Kathy, moderator privilege. Old Chicago Tribune reporter, whose ranks of being a former Tribune reporter are growing daily. John McCarran. John. And a much younger version, who's still employed, thank goodness, who works and runs the Chicago Reporter. Remember, John McDermott, God love him, God rest his soul, one of our great leaders, whoever, the man who had moderated the Tom Rose or Paul Green battles of the early City Club days. Alicia, where are you? Alicia Tate, stand up. There she is back there. Kathy Lawrence Spivak Posner, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Kathy Posner, member of Mensa, but never a recipient of the Genius Award. So that's why I just wanted to ask about the Genius Awards. I know you said it's only 5% of the money that you give away, but how do you decide who gets them? And I just wondered what the process was.
Well,
are you calling for a recount? Is that?
well, the first thing I want to say, those of you who remember the advanced placement exams before college, there are some people who are so smart they place out of the genius category. Yeah, I think that's right. The process is fairly simple. There are 1,000 unpaid nominators all across the country who serve generally for a year, and they recommend people. The staff vets the recommendations and boils them down to maybe 150 or so, which an outside independent selection committee looks over and struggles over to find 25 people from, of course, a much larger group of wonderful, talented, smart, creative people. So that's how it's done, and we're in the fields of the arts, sciences, social sciences, civic life.
Go ahead, Ken.
No, it's okay. Well, just a question. Also, I don't know what LISC is. You kept talking about LISC, and I saw in your brochures the letters, and I didn't know what it is.
Well, we debated
about. I might
be
a genius, but I didn't know.
Well,
what
we debated
were.
about that, and I was assured that 80% of the people in the room know that LISC stands for Local Initiative Support Corporation. It is an organization that can be found in 30 cities, and there's a national umbrella organization. And its role is to work to enable residents to seize hold of their own destiny, to improve their neighborhoods. LISC provides expertise, risk capital, consulting help for a range of projects, not just physical projects like housing and commercial development, which was its origins, but now moving into other fields like education and crime reduction and the arts and all the rest. And it's a fantastic organization. And I should say, It looked the other day, it ranks #1 in MacArthur's 30-year history. We've given more money to LISC National and LISC Chicago than any other institution or organization anywhere in the world. It's a great organization.
Hello, my name is Carmen Caldero. I'm the owner of an electrical supply company. I've been in business for the last 21 years. And in another life, I was president of the Hispanic Contract Association. And my question has to do with the development projects that result as part of this neighborhood communities initiative, and what opportunities will be for women and minority-owned businesses, contractors on these development projects.
So the question is how, as these development projects go forward, how do contractors, businesses connect to them?
Particularly with women and minority-owned community, starting with developers, architects, engineers, down to the landscape.
It's my understanding, and Andy will correct me if I'm wrong, that LISC puts a heavy emphasis on competitive bidding and proper representation of women and minority contractors. The idea is to not only create wonderful new buildings and parks and physical spaces, but also to provide jobs in these neighborhoods. And as we pursue economic development strategy, it's also about attracting businesses, retail, and other that will provide jobs for people who live in these neighborhoods.
So, but my question was, is there a specific component that's been developed to reach out to women and minorities in construction?
Andy, maybe you could answer that question.
Each of the projects are actually run by the local lead agency or development corporation, all of which are committed to very high proportions of minority women and local resident involvement in these projects. And generally, they run at 50% or better.
Okay.
Indeed, some of the organizations actually have their own construction teams, such as Hispanic Housing Development Corp. Or bigger factory development, and therefore actually control the employment and generally use it as an employment tool for folks out in the community. So the best connection is actually made at that point at the neighborhood level with the folks who are actually doing the project.
Good, thank you. I would, by the way, happy to take questions on anything MacArthur does: conservation, population, human rights, disarmament, juvenile justice, housing, education reform, whatever.
Hello, thank you for taking my question. My name is Jack McInerney. I'm with a authority called the Illinois Finance Authority. We're kind of like the de facto state bank. And my question is, when you fund something, do you normally do it alone, or do you collaborate with other funders? How do you work with private sector banks, with public sector banks? Do you work with other granting agencies, or do you ever do grant loan type of things? And who would we contact at MacArthur to help collaborate in those deals?
The answer is we like to partner. We have a program-related investment department. So in addition to making $250 million of grants, we will also in a given year make low-interest loans anywhere from $10 to $50 million. Our program-related investments have been concentrated on housing, affordable housing preservation. Deborah Schwartz is the director of our program-related investment department, and she'd be happy to talk with you. But we very much like partnerships. We MacArthur are part of an organization called Living Cities, which is a partnership of 17 foundations and financial institutions, including Bank of America, Deutsche Bank, and others, J.P. Morgan Chase, Rockefeller Foundation, Casey Foundation. And this organization has been working for 15, 16 years now in 23 cities, many of them the same cities that LISC is working in, to improve community development. And our work here in Chicago is actually feeds back into that larger consortium.
Hello, I just had a question. You had mentioned before that you were expanding some of your international outfits into China, and I was just wondering what kind of projects and community development things that you're doing there.
At the moment, MacArthur does two things in China. Our conservation program focuses on biodiversity preservation in 8 so-called hotspots, places of very rich biodiversity and where there are threats. And Yunnan in the west of China is part of our eastern Himalaya hotspot. So we do conservation on the ground in Yunnan. We also have a program on disarmament, our peace and security program, and we support a number of university disarmament centers in China, Tsinghua University, Fudan University, Peking University. We have made a toe in the water on the delicate issue of human rights. We support an organization based in New York and Hong Kong called Human Rights in China, which has been particularly powerful in spotlighting prisoners of conscience. We also, however, are working with the Tsinghua Law School to train trainers who will work with so-called barefoot lawyers, paraprofessionals in the countryside in China. While the Chinese government may not like the work we do in spotlighting political prisoners, they do like the work we do in helping get better legal representation for the rural population in China. So those are some building blocks, and we believe because of China's emerging importance to everything we do, we really need to do more there. We need to understand China from the inside, not just trying to pick our grantees from here.
2 more questions.
Let me just say one other thing. You may have seen in the papers the last couple of days a report coming out of Harvard's Berkman Center about the state of internet filtering. Our human rights program is very interested in this issue because the internet is one powerful way people in China and elsewhere communicate with each other and organize to protect their human rights. Authoritarian countries, of course, understand this and are beginning to clamp down on citizens' access to certain information. And the Berkman Center, working with the University of Toronto and Oxford, I think it is, now will every year come out with a report on the state of internet censorship and filtering. The first report looked at 41 countries finding filtering in 25 of them. China is high on the list of filtering. Surprisingly, Russia was still relatively open and free. So we'll be tracking that every year.
Hi, I'm Bill Rice, president of Shimer College. I'm going to ask a question that's completely outside my area of expertise, so forgive me if it's ill-informed. But regarding the recovery and resurrection of communities, has the foundation taken a fresh look at national drug policy as a possible source of some of the problems of those neighborhoods?
We get at the drug issue in a couple ways. Our juvenile justice program, which works to build a model system in 4 states, Illinois, Washington, Louisiana, and Pennsylvania, aims at developing a juvenile justice system separate from the adult system that places an emphasis on rehabilitation, on good counseling, on good care, and we find, as you'd imagine, a heavy overlap between kids who get in trouble and drug use. And so we are approaching the drug issue through the lens of our juvenile justice program. We also have a mental health program, and we look at the intersection of mental health problems and drug use as well. And finally, we are shortly going to announce an effort to bring some rationality to the way our society approaches ex-offenders. It's interesting, if you looked at a map of Illinois and Chicago, you'd find that a very large percentage of those released from prison every year concentrate in a few neighborhoods in Chicago, including some of the 16 neighborhoods we're working in. And we're working with the MacArthur Foundation and with the city and state are about to launch a demonstration project to see if, with proper counseling, both before release and after, in connection to social services, including drug counseling, whether we can't cut the recidivism rate dramatically. It may surprise you to know that 60% of the people released from prison are going to be back in prison within 3 years, some of them for violent crimes. Think as a taxpayer how expensive it is for you and for all of us to support people in prison. And think about the public safety implications of 2/3 of the people released committing a crime and having to go back to jail at our expense later on. And wouldn't it be more rational for us to put some money in on the front end and assume that a good number of these young men, mostly, and women, can get their lives back on track with some help? And certainly drug counseling and dealing with the drug issue is an important part of that.
Laura Lane with WPEC and NCP Woodlawn. As we were reviewing our quality of life plan and looking for other inputs and supports and infrastructure, one of the things that we started taking a look at was how technology infrastructure, lack thereof, and the digital divide issues impact the plan. Can you say a little bit about the Foundation's work in technology, and you guys have done so much in that area, and how it might inform the sort of work that we're doing in cities and with the other quality of life plans?
I like that question, and it's a worthy topic for a whole talk that I'd like to give somewhere. Because MacArthur, but I won't here. I know you have a.
It's called a Kathy Posner hit.
No, I know you have a 1:30 curfew. MacArthur believes strongly that technology in the digital age is having a profound effect on all aspects of life. In fact, we've taken our education program that used to concentrate on whole school reform and now directed it to trying to understand how technology and the digital world is changing the way kids are learning, acquiring content, skills, capacity for judgment. We're agnostic about it. We're not boosters. We're simply trying to understand. We have supported professors at MIT to develop what's known as a media literacy curriculum to help young people learn how to use technology in a constructive way. We're supporting the University of Wisconsin Institute on serious games, knowing kids spend so many hours now on games. Can we devise games that will teach kids something? We're piloting an after-school program on the South Side in conjunction with the University of Chicago, teaching media literacy in an after-school program, believing that it will eventually find its way into the regular school day. So we're doing a lot with technology and education. We're also looking for ways for technology to advance our programs all around the world. For example, we're experimenting in Nigeria with a system where information about maternal health, women's health, is transmitted on cell phones in brief messages. In the Bay Area, we have an experiment going with cell phones that are equipped to take environmental readings. And there are other examples, but we're just looking yesterday at a satellite program we're supporting that is able to go over, let's say, Peru and see where there's selective logging taking place in parks that we seek to preserve. So in everything we do, we're looking for smart applications of technology, and we certainly believe in social networks, viral networks, people doing the same thing, being in touch with each other through communities built online. We're also interested in the media world in this new phenomenon called citizen journalists. We all know that it's hard to get news from outside the United States, hard to get serious news on important topics. And yet there are people now, just average citizens, able with a cell phone or a camera to capture images, moving images of a genocide in the making in Central Africa, abject poverty in a rural village in Nigeria, things that we should see and feel and know about. And so we're looking at how mainstream media that doesn't have reporters, alas, anymore, if they ever did, in all these remote places, able to cover all these important issues, how we can mobilize the power of citizens who are observing these things and reporting them and get them to intermediaries who can aggregate and edit and judge the credibility and then get them into the mainstream media. So technology is a big issue for us, and I'd love to come back and talk about it sometime. Anyway, you've been a great audience. Thank you very much.
This is the City Club. You never go away empty-handed. Sort of like applying to MacArthur. If you want to get to $7 billion, this will help on the corners.
Thank you.
A one-year membership to the City Club of Chicago. Imagine the City Club giving the MacArthur Foundation a free membership. You belong to one hell of a club. And
thank you.
A history of the City Club filled with geniuses. How about a big round of applause for our speaker? Good job.